Samantha Reed was 33 years old and lived in a small, rented apartment in the city. She worked part-time as a hostess at a luxury restaurant, but her heart was never in the job. Samantha was beautiful, with long dark hair and striking green eyes. She knew how to dress in a way that turned heads, and she often dreamed about a life filled with wealth, travel, and luxury. For years, she had been searching for the right man to give her the lifestyle she felt she deserved. She didn't want love, not really. What she wanted was money, power, and status. To her, marriage was just a ladder. And one evening, as she stood at the entrance of the restaurant greeting guests, she met the man she believed would change everything. His name was Martin Cole, a 48-year-old businessman. He was a self-made millionaire, known for his chain of real estate companies spread across the state. He was tall, confident, and carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that made people listen. He was also married, something Samantha noticed immediately when she spotted the gold band on his finger. But that did not discourage her. In fact, it only made her more determined. When Martin came into the restaurant with his wife, Lydia, a graceful woman in her mid-40s, Samantha's eyes followed them all night. She watched the way Lydia smiled, the way she touched Martin's arm, and she felt a sting of jealousy. She whispered to herself, "That should be me sitting at that table." Over the next few weeks, Martin visited the restaurant several times, usually with business partners. Samantha made sure she was always the one to greet him. She laughed at his jokes, complimented his suits, and found little ways to linger at his table longer than necessary. Martin was polite but distant. He seemed loyal to his wife, often mentioning her during conversations. Still, Samantha refused to give up. She began researching him online, reading about his business deals, his family, and even finding pictures of his home. She learned that Martin and Lydia had been married for 20 years and had no children. She discovered that Lydia often hosted charity events and that Martin was highly respected in the business community. The more she learned, the deeper her obsession grew. Samantha began to imagine herself in Lydia's place, living in the mansion, wearing designer clothes, being photographed at charity events. She would tell her reflection in the mirror, "One day, that life will be mine." Soon, her thoughts turned darker. She began following Lydia around town, watching her shop for groceries, attend events, and meet with friends. She noticed how often Lydia was alone, and an idea began to form in Samantha's mind. If Lydia was gone, Martin would be vulnerable, heartbroken, and needing comfort. And who better to offer that comfort than her? One evening, Samantha sat alone in her apartment with a glass of wine. She pinned photos of Martin and Lydia on her wall like pieces of a puzzle. She stared at them for hours, her heart racing with excitement. "I will have him," she whispered into the silence. "No matter what it takes." What started as an innocent attraction had now turned into a dangerous obsession. Samantha no longer just wanted Martin's attention. She wanted his entire life, and she was willing to cross any line to get it. Samantha's obsession with Martin grew stronger every day. Her life now revolved around him. She stopped caring about her job, her bills, and even her friends. Everything she did had one goal: to take Lydia's place. She knew she couldn't just walk up to Martin and confess her feelings. That would make her look desperate. Instead, she needed a plan, a way to make herself appear important, trustworthy, and eventually irresistible. Her first step was to accidentally bump into him outside the restaurant. She spent days learning his schedule, watching which gym he went to, where he parked his car, and what time he usually left the office. One Thursday evening, she waited near his car in the parking garage, pretending to look for her keys. When Martin appeared, she dropped her purse on purpose, spilling its contents on the ground. Martin, being the gentleman he was, bent down to help her gather her things. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice kind. "Yes, thank you," Samantha said with a shy smile. "I didn't expect to see you here. Small world, isn't it?" Martin smiled politely and wished her a good night before walking away. It wasn't much, but to Samantha, it was a start. From then on, she worked her way into his orbit. She joined the same gym he attended, sat near him at the coffee shop he favored, and always found a reason to say hello. Martin remained distant, but Samantha noticed he didn't seem suspicious. He probably thought she was just a friendly acquaintance. Her obsession deepened when she overheard Martin talking to a friend about Lydia's charity work. Samantha quickly researched the charity and signed up as a volunteer. She made sure to appear at the same events Lydia attended, smiling warmly and pretending to admire her work. Lydia, who was gracious and polite, welcomed Samantha with open arms. She had no idea that the younger woman had been watching her every move with envy and hatred. At one event, Lydia even introduced Samantha to Martin. "This is Samantha. She's been helping us with the fundraiser," Lydia said. Martin gave a polite nod. "Nice to see you again," he said. Samantha's heart fluttered. To him, it was just a greeting. To her, it was proof that she was finally being noticed. But patience was not Samantha's strength. Weeks passed, and she grew restless. Martin was still loyal to his wife, showing no signs of being tempted by Samantha's presence. Every smile Lydia gave him felt like a knife to Samantha's chest. Every time they held hands in public, Samantha's anger grew hotter. One night, she sat in her apartment, surrounded by wine bottles and photos of Martin and Lydia. She whispered, "She doesn't deserve him. She's had him long enough. That life should be mine." She began imagining scenarios where Lydia was out of the picture. At first, it was harmless: divorce, a breakup, or Martin simply growing tired of his wife. But soon, her thoughts turned darker. What if Lydia wasn't just gone, but gone forever? Samantha started planning. She thought about where Lydia shopped, where she parked her car, and which roads she drove home on. She even followed her late at night, noting the quiet, poorly lit streets she used. The trap was slowly being set. Samantha told herself it was fate, that she was only doing what destiny required. She convinced herself that Martin would be happier with her, that he needed a younger, more exciting woman by his side. As she stared at the photos on her wall, her mind was made up. "If I want the life I deserve," she whispered, "then Lydia must disappear." The obsession that started with smiles and compliments was now turning into a deadly plan. The night Samantha had been imagining for weeks finally came. The plan wasn't perfect, but in her mind, it didn't have to be. She believed fate was on her side, and that gave her a dangerous confidence. She had been following Lydia closely for days. She knew that Lydia often attended a small book club on Wednesday nights at a friend's house. It wasn't far from the Coles mansion, and Lydia usually drove home alone around 9 p.m. Samantha decided that would be the night she made her move. That evening, Samantha dressed in dark clothing and parked her car on a quiet street not far from the book club location. She waited with her heart pounding, her hands clutching the steering wheel as the minutes dragged on. At last, she saw Lydia's silver Lexus pull out of the driveway and head down the road. Samantha followed at a safe distance. The streets were nearly empty, and the night was silent except for the hum of engines. Samantha's mind raced with thoughts. "This is it. Once she's gone, Martin will finally be mine." Lydia stopped at a red light, and Samantha pulled up behind her. Her hands shook as she reached into her purse for the heavy wrench she had brought along. She had thought of other methods, but in the end, she chose something simple, something brutal. When the light turned green, Lydia drove on, unaware that danger was following her. A few minutes later, she turned into a quiet street, only a few blocks from home. That was when Samantha struck. She sped up and flashed her headlights, making it seem like something was wrong with Lydia's car. Concerned, Lydia pulled over to the side of the road. She rolled down her window slightly as Samantha approached. "Excuse me, is everything all right?" Lydia asked, her voice calm but cautious. Samantha forced a smile. "Yes, but I think something fell from your car back there. You might want to check." Lydia frowned and opened the door. She stepped out, looking down the road, confused. That was when Samantha raised the wrench and swung with all her strength. The sound of metal meeting skull was sharp and sickening. Lydia gasped and collapsed to the ground, her blood pooling quickly on the pavement. Samantha's heart pounded like a drum. She struck again to make sure Lydia would not rise. When Lydia's body stopped moving, Samantha dropped the wrench beside her, breathing heavily. She dragged the body to the passenger seat of Lydia's car, pushing it in with trembling hands. Then she slid behind the wheel and drove the Lexus to a nearby wooded area she had scouted days earlier. The trees cast dark shadows, and the air smelled of damp earth. Samantha parked, wiped her hands, and shoved Lydia's lifeless body into a shallow ditch. She covered it with branches and leaves, whispering, "I'm sorry, but this had to happen." Then she drove the car deeper into the woods, leaving it abandoned before walking back to where she had left her own vehicle. On the drive home, her hands shook, but her lips curled into a smile. In her mind, she was free at last. Lydia was gone, and soon Martin would need comfort, guidance, and love. And Samantha would be there, ready to step into the life she had always wanted. She poured herself a glass of wine. When she returned to her apartment and raised it in, a toast to the photos of Martin on her wall. "To us," she whispered. Finally. But what Samantha didn't realize was that she had left behind evidence, fingerprints on the car, witnesses who had seen her following Lydia, and the trail of obsession that connected her to the Cole family. The night of murder was not the end. It was only the beginning of her downfall. The morning after Lydia's disappearance, Martin Cole grew worried. His wife had never come home from her book club, and her phone went straight to voicemail. At first, he thought she might have stayed late with friends. But by sunrise, he knew something was wrong. Martin called the police, his voice heavy with fear. Detectives quickly launched an investigation. Lydia's Lexus was found abandoned in the woods 2 days later. Inside, there were faint traces of blood on the seat and steering wheel. Near the car, officers discovered drag marks leading into the trees, where they found Lydia's lifeless body covered by branches. The blow to her head had been fatal. Martin was devastated. He broke down in front of the detectives, unable to understand who would want to harm his wife. The police searched for answers, looking at business rivals, strangers, and even Martin himself. But as they dug deeper, a new name began to appear again and again: Samantha Reed. Several witnesses told investigators that they had seen Samantha following Lydia at events. Others recalled how Samantha always seemed to hover around Martin, smiling too much, laughing too loudly. One neighbor even said she had noticed Samantha parked near the Cole residence late at night. The evidence piled up quickly. Fingerprints belonging to Samantha were found inside Lydia's Lexus. Surveillance cameras showed Samantha's car trailing behind Lydia's vehicle on the night of the murder. The final piece came when police searched Samantha's apartment. There, pinned to her wall, were dozens of photos of Martin and Lydia, notes about Lydia's schedule, and even a map of the wooded area where Lydia's body was discovered. Samantha was arrested at dawn. She screamed and fought as officers dragged her away, insisting, "I did it for love. Martin was supposed to be mine." She stood in the way. In court, the truth of her obsession became clear. The prosecution painted Samantha as a manipulative gold digger who had built her entire plan around stealing another woman's life. They showed the jury her wall of photographs, her internet searches about Lydia, and her diary entries where she wrote, "One day soon, he will be mine completely." Martin sat in the courtroom, his face pale with grief. The woman who had destroyed his life sat only feet away, her once confident smile replaced by bitterness and rage. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Samantha Reed was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the sentence was read, Samantha glared at Martin. "You could have loved me," she hissed. "I would have given you everything." Martin turned away. He had lost the woman who had stood by his side for over 20 years. And no words from Samantha could change that. Behind bars, Samantha's beauty and charm no longer mattered. The mansion, the luxury, and the lifestyle she craved were gone forever. All she had left were the 4 cold walls of a prison cell and the haunting knowledge that her obsession had led her to murder. The city never forgot the case. Newspapers called it the gold digger killing, a chilling reminder of how envy and obsession can destroy lives. And so, Samantha's dream of living as the wife of a millionaire ended not in wealth and happiness, but in chains and regret.